Hi, this is the Always Right podcast, and I am Karisa DeLay, and this is
Jaime Vendera, and welcome back to
yes,
another
episode
episode.
three.
Yes,
Yeah,
episode three.
Hopefully, we'll eventually get to a point where we forget we can't even count,
Well, I would know that if I were organized this morning.
right? But I'm the organized one of the two, and I have a super laid out episode list of what we're doing and when we're doing it, so I can keep Jamie on point.
Oh no, I'm afraid this is going to be the episode on organization or something like that.
Well, it is.
Uh,
Yes, we're going to talk about today how, as writers, we're both authors, how we organize our thoughts, things that we utilize to create that organization. Listen, Jamie, are you going to keep banging things around?
yeah, because I'm not organized. I'll put that on the floor.
Got it.
There, we're good now.
That was not a bong. That was a Dr. Vox.
I have gotten a million emails about that. Where do you put the weed?
Right? There's no hole for the weed.
Hey, I said that to the doctor the first time I saw the glass version. He wasn't too thrilled with me, but come on. It's
You gotta have
obvious.
fun with it. I mean, sometimes marketing is marketing. I don't care how you PR it, it's PR.
Yeah, that's what we say in that commercial. I'm Dr. Vox, and this is not a bong. So anyway, ADHD kicking in. Back to the always right.
Yes, always right. So as you've learned in the past two podcasts, we are here to talk about all things writing, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, your college paper, eventually songwriting, whatever you're writing, we're going to talk about it. So today we're going to talk about organization. And I'm going to start with asking you a question. You have a lot of books. So
you're asking me a question. I thought you were asking the audience
first, but I'm going to kind of guide you a little bit so we can stay on this.
Good, because I didn't get organized for this. So
I know this. When you have a story, how do you organize your storyboard? Let's start with fiction, and then tell me how you organize your nonfiction.
Okay, well, to start with fiction, I must say, since I was a nonfiction author first, that has greatly affected how I do fiction, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this is going to sound like a cop-out, but if I'm writing a horror novel like Flight 666, or I'm writing something that's more like a Harry Potter or Dungeons and Dragons, like Age of the Sigil, I literally binge watch tons of stuff on Netflix or Hulu or whatever. I mean, I'm talking like I prefer TV shows because I can just really consume episode after episode. And it's not so much to get to steal, it's not about that. I really very creative, but let's be honest, there's nothing new. You read any story, there's elements that are around. There's dragons, there's elves, there's this, that, and I know you're like, yeah, well, I come up with something new. That may be the point.
I'm pretty sure that's what this book was.
or murder or stuff like that. There's still elements of other things. So I just watch a lot of stuff to get organized. Like, how would they unfold? So for me, it's a character development for sure. So I look at a book, and I don't know why I do this, but I always think in 10 chapters. It's usually a lot more, but I start plotting out just my notes. Like if someone said to me, oh, Age of the Sigil, which is a book I wrote, I think in terms of it being a TV show or a movie, and they're like, oh, what's it about? And then I think of like 10 bullet points, and I try to walk in like, oh, there's these 4 teenagers, and they're one's a princess and one's somebody who lives on a farm in chapter 1, and then chapter 2, all these tattoos start appearing on their bodies magically out of the midst. Chapter 3, oh, there's an evil. So I start to plot like what would be the bullet points to lead me. Where do I want to begin? What's
so you do it chronologically then?
I am very chronologically, so I say I'm not organized because I am more visual and I'm more creative. But when I'm writing a book, I have to get organized. I know, like we have another podcast coming up where I say writer's block doesn't exist.
That's
you say it does, and but the thing is, for me, I think it's because I'm ADHD. Hard to believe, but I think I am, and.
A lot of people are.
Yeah, but I literally, it's probably the same way with you, Karisa. If I have my bullet points, I will start writing, and it's just like, bleh. I mean, I'm just puking it out. It doesn't stop. It's word vomit, and I can't stop. The biggest mistake I've seen other authors make is if you stop and you have to look at that paragraph and be like, okay, I got to add the comma and I got to rearrange in this. No. For me, no. I just put it out there. and I may spit out everything that's in my mind for my first bullet point, which may be chapter 1, those teenagers. Ooh, I thought about the villain. I got a name for him. Oh, I got that as bullet point 3, which may be chapter 3. I hop down there and I will write. So I'm not even writing the full book in the beginning. I'm writing all of these ideas that pop out. And the weird thing is if I let that happen, something else clicks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, I forgot to add this. Or, ooh, I got a great ending. So I put all that together, and then I'll take a couple days and I'll go through and I will clean that up. And I'm look like, what is missing?
So when you do that, do you have a certain app that you use, or are you a paper person, or are you more of a digital person?
In the beginning, I was a paper person.
Mm-hmm.
I still think it's a great art form, honestly. Something about writing pen or pencil to paper is just so great. Back in the day when I did that, you didn't have apps where you like text to speech or where you could take a picture of it and it would turn it into words. So
well,
I'd
you're
have
terrible
to
at text to speech.
Well, yes, that's a whole nother that's a whole nother podcast. So, but I think you finally learned to figure me out. You've actually
Yes, I'm like I can read between the Appalachian texting.
She went to Rosetta Stone and they had languages, English, Spanish, Jaime Vendera, text to speech, and then it was all good. But no, I literally
yes.
Nowadays I kind of do use text to speech, and I try to slow down. That's my problem when I'm texting you. It's and so then you never understand. But if I say, Kildra did this today, period. If I slow down, I at least get half of it. It's a little cleaner.
And you really kind of have to time that perfect, because if you go too slow, it's already finished you. It's like, oh, I'm done.
Yes, I know. And you'll see that. I know, because I'm like, why? How did I have a period in there? It's 16 spots. It's only one sentence. That's exactly what happens.
Yeah, that's sometimes my challenge with texting to talk is that right there, because I'm like in thought, waiting for it to catch up, but then it's already caught up mentally or AI wise, and then I'm like trying to add more, and then it's like capitalizing things that don't need to be. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, but the beautiful thing about it is if you're a creative fiction writer and you're driving down the road and you have your phone, you're like, I could never solve this one spot. I wanted something with this character. You can turn it on so you don't have an accident, and you can just do text to speech. Like I use Google Drive. I used to use Microsoft Word. The problem with that is you always had to update it. And I remember in the very beginning, like way back when on a nonfiction book, I had written like 12, 14 hours a day. I didn't know I had to have autosave on. I was too new at the game. My computer just went, it crashed, and everything was gone. Nothing was saved at all. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me! So I had to start over again. So I do use Google Drive because it's always saved as you write. But the funny thing is, I write a lot with my thumbs. People think I'm nuts. I've written complete books on my iPhone because I could wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, let me check my socials, and then blah, 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 and I'll write. And then I go back and forth between text to speech. And
that's kind of how with my first book, as you learned previously, that I had no desire to be an author, but when I did have a dream and wanted to write it down into a book, the first thing I did was I went out, which I'm an Apple person. Shout out to Apple. I'm not sponsored by Apple, but love my Apple products.
I didn't used to be, but I am now.
So I went out, bought it was the second generation iPad, and I just turned it landscape version, and I just typed. But I mean, I had 3 babies under the age of 2 at the time, essentially. And I'm like typing on there, and I'm like 9 months later, I've just have this, it had a format for a book, and I'm like, I'm just going to follow this format. And it made it easy for me. And my organization with that first one was basically getting the iPad and just having it digital, because I'm a digital person. And then in the second one, I kind of did a little bit with you, because I'm not I can't chapter jump. I can't do that. My brain's different. Mine has to go very chronological in how I write, because I have to remember what I wrote previously, be like in a flow. So my second book, I wrote an outline of each chapter. Essentially, I knew where I was going because I had the first one. Second one, I'm like, okay, this chapter I want this to happen. Second chapter I want this to happen. But I couldn't jump I have to go write chapter 17. I have to get all 16 first before I get to 17. So I just can't do that. I can't jump around.
And everybody's different. I mean, I think you have to find the process that works for you. And I couldn't do that because my brain is going in 15 different directions. And So I will try to hurry up and finish my frame of thought, unless I'm just afraid I'm going to forget. I'll jump over really quick and do it.
Yeah. Now with this fourth book, I'm extremely organized, and I'm utilizing as much digital note taking as possible. So on my I have, of course, all my Apple devices are connected. So whether I have my phone with me or whether I have the Notes app up on my laptop, I have several notes specifically for Canvas. One is a chapter outline of, like, chapter number. It has what's technically happening in the chapter, who are the characters that are either being introduced or characters that are coming back into the chapter. Then it has a title here of like because we have what's happening in the chapter, we know where it's happening, what time of day it's happening, and then I have stuff that you didn't learn in that chapter, like the chapter didn't give you away, that needs to be reintroduced in another chapter. So it kind of breaks it down. So yeah, so I can see, okay, in this chapter, I'm alluding to this, but I didn't tell you this. So then there's a whole column that says, make sure you pick back up and explain this. You know what I mean?
No, I get it. But does that unfold? Do you know that beforehand, or does it unfold? Because, like, I'll be
As
in
I'm
a chapter.
going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm the same way. I'll be going, I'm like, why didn't I think of this? And I got to take a little note, like, ooh, because I am very methodical in the sense, like, even since a lot of my books are in series, like Sigil or Crisis, I have to make sure everything is connected. There is no loose ends, which, I mean, is a good sign for every author. You have to do that.
Yeah. So and see, if I could go back and redo my first two books, I would have I would have kept better notes to connect, because I'm sure there's questions that were still unanswered. So whenever I decide to pick it back up, which I know a few friends have asked me, please pick up Crystal Gate and do a third book. I know if I ever pick that back up, that let me turn this.
I believe that's wise too.
Yeah,
but
well,
I don't know.
I'm going to answer questions that maybe I didn't hit, and explain things. But for the most part, a lot of stuff was explained. But like I have this main chapter guideline. But see, in this book, I have made every character someone I know. So, but only the people I like, because people I don't like don't get any power in my book.
Oh, so I'm not in it.
Okay. Oh, you're in it.
I'm the main killer.
There's a name in there. Yeah. So like what I did was I thought it'd be kind of cool to put, whether I use your first name or I do a play on your last name. And I can say this person's name, but my friend Christine, she's a serial killer lover. And so she knows she's a victim. And so with hers, like, I can use Christine. I spell it the way she spells it because it's unique, but I change her last name a little bit, but it's her. But like every name that's in the book is someone. So it's kind of cool to be like, well, who am I going to be? Am I going to be a victim? Am I going to be a witness? Am I going to be a street name? Street name, or am I going to be the name of am I going to be the name of some crime organization, or whatever? Like somehow, their names are going to be in there. And so I have a whole note system of real name, character name, where they first appear in a chapter, and I describe them. Like, how do I make their hair look? Do they have any distinctive marks? Do they, like, one of the characters, their right leg has a slight limp to it? What were they wearing? Making sure that whenever I put them in a sports coat, that they're not wearing a fur coat, a couple, chapters later.
I think this is brilliant. I honestly think, because you know how my mind's thinking, this ought to be a product. You ought to be making this as a sheet for aspiring authors. Because with me, I have lists like that in Google Drive. It's still so unorganized. I'm like, wait a minute, what did Esther Dane, what did she wear all the time? What did she used to say? Crikey. I don't know. I had to go back and do that. But if I had something like that, it's just a spreadsheet, but it's really nice and meticulous. Yes. Yeah. You wouldn't lose track.
And so then I have another one I have so many for this one. Like I said, I wish I would have done this with my other ones, but like, you live and learn, and each time I'm evolving as an author. But so I have one too, because certain things mean certain things. Like, so maybe a text message. Like, I'm just going to give an example. I'm not going to do the text message one. I'm going to do, there's a phone, like there's a phone number. Well, the numbers in the phone number actually are a date or have some significant meaning, or they spell something out that gives you the clue. Or like one of the chapters is like 21 miles from downtown. It's because I love 21 Pilots, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Oh
just,
my gosh.
yes.
I'm not this like witty as you are, but I love that because like my horror series, the second book is Long Cold Winter, and I named it that because that's my favorite album by Cinderella. But here's the weird
Mhm.
thing: I don't even know how I came up with this. Every chapter title, if you're a Journey fan, is a title of one of their songs. But
Mhm.
it just kind of worked out that way. I'm like, okay, why that don't even make any sense. The book's title under just Cinderella, but Journey, but it had to do with music. So when you said
Mhm.
21 Pilots, I'm like, yes, that is
Mhm.
cool.
Oh yeah. So I mean, there's so much of me, like, which there's so much of me in my first two books too, because literally the main character, Alexis, is my alter ego. Like if I could have studied, you know, quantum physics and aliens at Wright-Patterson at the research lab, I would have done that.
And you would have fit in
Yeah.
for sure.
Social. So for me, I like to utilize, and whether you're an Apple user or you're a Mac user, I don't know what Mac offers, but I'm sure there's a system that you can keep your notes, or the good old fashioned using paper, you know, like to write down. Because when I first start out, I might write the notes, but once I get into the speed of it, I start digitizing everything, so it's available to me. Because sometimes I don't have the time to sit down and keep that organized. Because for me, and this is just me, like when I'm first trying to organize something, I have to write it and see it, and then I can, like, my brain kind of does the whole like, okay, put this here, 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 then I know how to digitize it. So I start out with paper usually for the first couple chapters. I'm like, okay, now I know what I need to do, now I can put it in digital.
No,
So
I dig it. I mean, I never wanted to be an author, so my first book, Raise Your Voice, was based on a lot of notebooks I kept where I wrote by
oh yeah,
hand.
you said that before. Yeah.
Yeah, all the stuff on vocal health and technique and exercises and studying with different coaches and books from the 1800s and then putting my own twist on it. So I still believe in writing by hand. I love keeping journals.
Hmm.
Diaries are great. They always inspire me. It's just for me, it's like, then I got to take that next step. And I could do something like I mean, I know they got apps now where you can snapshot if they can read your writing, which you couldn't mine. So it's my handwriting is worse than my text to speech. But you can do that, or you can hire somebody on Fiverr. That's cool, but I honestly think if you're going to write by hand, follow the creative journey. I mean, I wouldn't have somebody else do it for you. I would literally transfer it yourself to make sure because you feel like, yes, I
Because
did this.
it's almost like learning something. When typically when people
Yes,
learn something the first time, they only like retain like 2%. You know, they're not, I don't even know if that's really the accurate percentage, but it's very small. So each time you hear it, like it might be like you learn over and over again. That's why people are like, oh, I learned math in high school, but I don't remember it. Well, because you haven't done it multiple times. So like if you have that foundation and then you go learn it again, you're going to retain more. So it's the same idea with your
absolutely.
storyline. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I know the basis of my storyline as an author because I wrote Crystal Gate and I wrote Four Rivers. But there are things I'm like, when I go back and read things, I'm like, oh, I totally forgot I put that in there because I haven't read it multiple times. Probably some of my readers probably know more than I do. So when I go to pick it back up, I'm going to have to read it, take notes, and get that stuff kind of reorganized so that when I write that third one, it just kind of, comes together.
Good. So, any last tips on fiction? Because I want to talk about nonfiction because I know
Nope.
you wrote a nonfiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you have too. So yeah, so
Yep.
let's move on to nonfiction now. Like it's a different type of organization.
Well, how is it different for you?
So for me, the organization was more of a research standpoint and connecting things together. Is making sure that you know it's a flow that when I so even we will talk about this in a future podcast as well. Is we're going to talk about the difference of types of writing, fiction, nonfiction, or whatever. When the voice that you use, but when I'm writing and organizing nonfiction, it was kind of like when I write a college paper. You have to make sure that um, what you're stating has a checks and balances. You have to make sure not only am I just writing this, but you have to make sure you organize your citations. You make sure that the people that you had, I mean, losing a quote. Well, you got to make sure that don't forget to put that at the end. So you have to make notes. This has to go at the end. So for me, it was more of like, if I'm saying this, it's almost like you have to move chronologically in order and build on to what you're trying to teach in nonfiction.
Yeah, and I know you're meticulous about it, but you were that way with Crystal Gate and Four Rivers, which actually tie into Journey to Eden. So I know you were kind of doing some research as you wrote that fiction, which
Yeah,
led
well,
to.
the research that I did in the not in the fiction books was purely like inspirational, and I just followed the prompting to do the research. And then when I pulled it out, the research was like this much. And then when I talked to MUFON, and then whenever you're like you have to write a nonfiction about this stuff, the research became like this. So my research was more like note taking for college. Like I'm writing almost like my own lecture notes essentially. So I'm writing like all these notes and stuff, but they're not like, oh, the character does this, the character does that. No, it's like, okay, this is where I found this. I got to keep expanding. Where did you find these maps? Where did you do this? All these things. So it's a little different with your note taking because I'm taking notes on what I'm finding versus making it up in my head.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fact checking, and I get it. Even though my fiction writing kind of falls into I'm organizing where the story's going, that's the same way I do nonfiction. That's how I started with Raise Your Voice, even the breathing workout, or even Unleash Your Creative Mindset, where I'm talking about the creative side of things. I always look at it like you said, a lecture. I'm going to do a presentation, and I have 2 hours, 3 hours. How am I going to explain this? Well, I'm
Mm-hmm.
Jaime Vendera. This book is about singing. Here are the fundamentals: breathing, support, placement. Let's talk about vocal health. Here are some exercises. Here's what you do when you're on stage. So I look at
Yes,
it, and
chronological building point. Yeah.
I'm always building to the head of it, and then the conclusion. The conclusion in my 400-page book, Raise Your Voice, I say everything you just learned in here, just forget it and go on stage and do your thing. Now I know you're going to be mad at me, but it's true. I mean, here's the problem with vocal coaching is singers, they'll read a book or they'll study with a coach and they get so technical and they forget, why did you get into this subject in the first place? Because you loved it. It could be this love of math, of macrame, whatever it is. You got into it because you love it, so you don't want to become so methodical. So, but still, you want to learn.
Some people thrive on methodical. Like
Yeah,
I'm methodical to an extent that I thrive personally on that organization.
yeah.
I feel
Well,
like if the things are out here like chaotic, I have to rope them in somehow. I mean I because I feel like I have like functional ADHD to an extent because I can have several tabs open.
yep. Same here.
But at the same time, I know where my tabs are. I can rein them in. Like, okay, I can organize all my tabs to where I know, like, I can just go in a circle, like, and make sure that I'm doing them all.
No, I totally believe that is the way. No, I totally believe. I think with singing, it's just that I've seen singers over these years that they get so technical and worry about how their breathing is that they forget to have fun and
Right.
sing, because when you're singing, you're actually an actress or an actor. You're telling a story, just
Mm-hmm.
like us writing fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I want to sing you these words, but tell you the story of this song and make you believe it. So I'm going
Right.
to use
It makes
emotion
it
to
more
drive that
powerful.
song.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so when you get technical, you'll be like, man, and I know you've seen this, you'll be like, man, that singer, they are great. Technically, they can hit all the notes, those runs, but they just didn't move me. They're boring. It's because they're too technical. Then you can hear somebody like a Joe Cocker, what will I do? And he sings like that. There's no technique,
Mm-hmm.
but it just pulls you in.
I think
So,
if I was ever a singer, I'd be a technical one and I'd be terrible because
yes.
I would be so worried about all the perfection parts of it. I wouldn't be able to do and I see that when people like it's even when people are in like jazz bands, they like can just what is it, Jimmy Fallon or whatever, where they have their band like is it the Roots, and
Yep.
they just like riff things off. I'm like I couldn't do that. I'm just way so technical in certain things. I couldn't just riff it off and be able to and put that behind it when it comes to something like that.
Yeah, I'd rather be creative. I mean, I'm very technical the way I teach, but at the end of the day, as we get through that, yes, we get into the creative process, which is probably why I love writing fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Because I even in singing, when teaching somebody, I live in the visual. I'm always talking with my hands. I'm like, hey, it's like Tai Chi, or I'm really tiny and I'm really loud if I'm out there. So I'm always moving. So I want to tell a story. So there's my ADHD again. How we get on singing. This is about organization.
You
See?
know what? It's organic. It's totally fine. Like what that's the thing though. That's kind of how we work. So here's the thing. In this podcast, I'd like to introduce that we do have an email. It is Always Right Podcast, and the all is ALL. alwayswritepodcast@gmail.com. So if you want to send us stories of how you write, and then later on we can retouch this subject, you can we can share your ideas, give you a shout out. Maybe this is how you did your book. We'd like to hear it. We'd like to hear how you organize. Maybe you have some ideas out there for other authors that may help them, and we'd like to share that. So
Yeah, no, that is because the purpose of this podcast is to help you grow. And Chris and I mean, we've written for quite some time, but there are millions of authors. So if we can grow as a community and help other people, and have you help us help other people, absolutely.
Yes. So with nothing else, we are going to move on to the next. And
I figured that would drive you nuts when I.
Oh yes. Oh.
All right, I guess it's time for another podcast then.
Yes, it's time to. Yeah, we're going to move on to the next episode, but stay tuned to the next episode where we're going to talk about, and we're going to have a little debate here. We've never pre-discussed this one coming up. We're going to talk about writer's block.
All right, I got to go get my boxing gloves, so we'll see you in a minute.
All right, thank you for joining us, and this is the Always Right podcast, and I am Karisa DeLay, and this is
Jaime Vendera.
Did you forget your name for a second?
I forget it was my turn to mention my name.
All right. Thanks for listening. Until next time.
See ya.
Bye.